Hi, and welcome to the Soul and Survival podcast with Grant and Louise Bentley. We have run the Victorian College of Classical Homeopathy since 1995. We are both qualified practicing homeopaths, and Grant is also a naturopath. Together, we discovered a link between energy and facial structure based on traditional ideas from homeopathy that have roots going back 200 years. This project is called Homeopathic Facial Analysis, or HFA for short, and has been the cornerstone of clinical diagnosis and training courses since 1999. Between us, we have written and produced 7 HFA books, including Soul and Survival. Soul and Survival is the philosophy of energy influencing matter and how this energy forms individual facial structure, our unconscious drives and fears, our life patterns, and universal time cycles.
Well, hello everybody and welcome to this next Soul and Survival podcast. I'm Grant and welcome to you, Louise.
Hi Grant, how are you going?
Good, thank you very much. Now, I have had zero preparation as I do every single week, so tell me, what are we talking about?
Well, you have such a good impromptu brain, but I wanted to talk about some books. I think either the last podcast or the one before, we were talking about a few of the books. So I've pulled a few out, but I'm going to have to do a little bit more searching. We have about, I think, 800 or so homeopathic books, and some of them are in boxes, including yours. I do want to find a copy of Aphorism 27 because that's such an interesting book. But for today, I thought, let's do a bit of Soul and Survival. I would like you to remember as best you can, and for the audience, you wrote this book between, I think, 2006, 2007 and early 2008, and it came out in 2008. So it was a good 2 years went into the production of it, but I know the ideas were formulating for many years prior. So my first question is the title, Soul and Survival, and the common human experience is the subtitle. Why did you choose that?
Okay, I'm going to preface that with the fact that I have never, ever, not once, ever read a book that I've written. And that's because I just find mistakes and also too that evolution means that in an ongoing learning process that, you know, what I know now may not be applicable to a 2008 book. I mean, so, you know, I don't go back. I've never ever written it. And the other part...
Written it or read it?
Oh, yes,
you did write it.
I've definitely written it. So sorry, I've never ever read it, and I've never read any book. Actually, I've never read any book that because the other thing is that I'm always on the lookout for the next new thing, and you know, once I moved away from a book, I'm glad it's finished by that stage. So I generally don't go back to it at all. Now, the thing with Soul and Survival is that Soul and Survival's knowledge, it's not kind of practical application in the sense of it doesn't help you choose a remedy, it helps you understand patients, definitely, and it helps you understand motivations, but it's not a clinical book as such.
But you wanted to share how you were starting to understand the philosophy, because you really, I mean, I want to impress this to the audience because, I mean, I was there through the whole thing, as were quite a few students. There's a kookaburra in the background there. Yeah. I don't know if that'll come through. Anyway, you know, those were really interesting years because HFA, the system, really started to find its feet by 2003, and then by 2006, the facial analysis practical book, which we did to upgrade the practical application. But you had thought about the philosophy all the way through and used to share it with the students, and you'd have long debates with them about what it meant, the directional forces, so many aspects of it. So, you know, delve into your memory. And again, the title and then of Soul and Survival and the common human experience. I mean, why did you choose those?
It's because there are two aspects to every human being. And why I was going to do the preface, by the way, is because if you start reading things out, you got to remember, because it's not a practical book, so I don't use it all the time. Plus, I've never ever read it now for nearly 20 years. That I might get a bit stumped by some.
I don't think you will, but we'll see.
Okay, so the soul and survival is simply to represent the struggle that we have in the balancing act of we are two people in one. Every human being is two human beings all locked into the one body, and one is this sort of learning, evolving, conscious, emotional self. The other is an instinctive given process that is, not a process, a program that we will go into in times of stress. That's our survival mechanism. And so hence the survival. And the soul part is often the bit that we refer to ourselves as that we're better than that. We're aspiring to love and art and spirituality are all aspects of a self that go beyond just trying to satisfy our base survival needs. So that's the soul part. The survival part is also to the main thing that we are dealing with when, as a practitioner, a lot of the time, by the time a patient when a person becomes a patient, often what has happened is that balancing act between our conscious higher nature, and you don't have to refer it to a soul, because soul is sort of often referred to in religious terms as something that is beyond the mind and whatever. But as long as we understand that we're talking about the generalized good intent of a person's emotional, mental state and their ability to consciously deliberate through problems, to include others like other family members, partners and things, and show that concern for others, and that there's a real beauty to human nature. It doesn't have to always be against adversity and all this sort of Hollywood thing. There's just a beauty to human nature where we're kind of in it together. But you'll never be in it together when you're in a survival state. A survival mode state is always about you. It's never about we. When I talk about this beautiful aspect of people, it was highlighted not that long ago where I was just watching a show, the English comedian Michael McIntyre. Mm-hmm. And I was watching a show on him. I mean, an incredibly funny guy. He's fantastic. I love him. But what it was that they were playing a practical joke on one of the members of the audience. And this massive audience of I don't know how many thousands all kept quiet and were in anticipation because they were in on the gag. And then when the gag was revealed to that individual, everyone's laughing, not at that person, but just at the whole gag of it, And I just thought, God, human beings are so bloody nice. Because they are. Because we keep getting told how horrible and how ruthless and we are, and I'm not doubting that there are people like that. But the average person is just really nice, and they were laughing and getting immersed and engaged in this performance that was all done for the celebration of laughter not necessarily at this other person's expense, but they were the one that was being pranked, and they were good-natured about it. But it was just the way the audience sort of all participated and were all engaged and were all part of this joke, and they loved it. And I couldn't help but be swept up into, just how nice we are as a species. And I understand dogs are lovely animals and cats are lovely animals. And we've got our dog, and I've been throwing it at its rubber toy, and it runs and it catches it, and it's got, its tail is wagging and all that. But human beings are that little bit extra because that audience was doing it for the participation of someone else. A dog doesn't do that.
Yeah.
Right? It does it for itself, but it doesn't consider... It doesn't consider a third person, let alone in this audience, someone that we're going to be part of this and engage with this for someone that we've never met before and probably will never meet again. And yet they were all in it at that one moment. And I just, so to me, I don't need any religious proof of a soul. I see that as the soul. I see that's what the soul is in a human being. And it's only human beings that do it, by the way. No other animal will do that. So that's my interpretation of soul, why I called it soul. The survival instinct, however, it's different. And it's a program, and it's predictable. And in fact, in some ways, it's boringly predictable. Not that it's boring, but it is really predictable. When I wrote Pandas, for example, I don't know, I often put a subtitle. Did I put a subtitle on that one?
Yes, you did. It's, here you go, I've got it in front of me. Let me have a look. I think it's a naturopathic... reaching out... A natural and homeopathic approach.
Okay. I was going to go... Oh, yeah, okay. So the thing with that book is that I get so many parents telling me about how I perfectly describe their child's existence or their behaviour. And that I must be some sort of genius for being able to do it. I'm not a genius. I'm seriously not. I'm so far away from being a genius, it's not funny. But what it does do is when you begin to recognise the program, you just see the program reproduce itself. That's all. So I don't have amazing insight. I've just seen it so many times. It hits you in the face after a while. And this survival instinct is switched on when we're in times of stress. Now, stress is a word that we could do a whole podcast on what stress is, on how to define it. But essentially, from a homeopathic perspective, stress is anything that takes you out of an energetic equilibrium. Now, that energetic... So, remember, I think we've already discussed this, where the vital force... I think we did a podcast where we were talking about the Hermetic tablet, and we were talking about...
As above, so below.
Yeah, and the Hermetic tablet, or at least as above, so below, is just another way of saying that life's a simillimum. And so if the vital force is going to represent or animate the body, then the vital force also has to act in the same way that the body works. Or the other way of saying it is that the body works in accordance to the laws and rules that the vital force places. So if all of the body works on feedback systems and homeostatic balance, then so too does the vital force. And so the vital force, when it's tipped out of its homeostatic range, either into hyper or hypo, automatically goes into its survival mode. And you don't have any control over that, by the way. That's already an instilled mechanism into every human being. And so when we're in that mode, though, that soul part of us, that engaging, that thinking, that deliberating, that beyond base needs soulful self is relegated to the background because there's not time for that. Because your body, the vital force it's sort of determining that energetic change as a dangerous state. And as a result of that, it just says, listen, I know you want to get back to your philosophy or you want to get back to whatever it is, but that's going to be on hold for a little while because we've got to get out of danger. It does everything. It seconds all available energy. And even like pandas, kids can stop growing. They could be meant to be going through a dentition period. That can stop. Learning can stop. It will all come back once we get them out of that danger spot. But it's essentially that danger means that we second every bit of everything that your body can muster to get us out of this particular sticky situation. Because if we don't get out of it, then what's the point? So your conscious relegation or that soulful self is in a constant balancing act with itself, with the survival instinct.
I love that explanation. And there's another part that's in the title that kind of gets overlooked, and yet if you look at it carefully, there's a third word in the main title, and the word is "and,"
which is actually really emphasised.
It's really emphasised. I mean, I've just got to point out the cover, and we've done this with the podcast. We wanted to call the podcast "Soul and Survival" because this is the philosophy behind it all. And and we had an artist put that together, and I remember we went and visited him and we talked about it all, and I was really impressed with how he listened to what you said and I said about it, and he came back with this beautiful and we've tried to keep it, it's very kind of flourishing and almost 1800s in its presentation, but it's such an important word. So what are your comments on the word "and"?
Well, the "and" is that you'll never ever be able to get rid of that balancing act. All you can do is try and tip it in your favour.
So you're not saying get rid of the survival instinct, destroy the miasm?
No.
It's "and". You are two, like a DNA twist, you are two people in one, and if you keep the focus on the "and", meaning you are two, and they're both in balance, you're your best self.
Yeah.
You're authentic.
If you can just have a little bit more soul than survival, then you're in a good place. But that survival instinct's always going to be there. It has to be there. This stuff about peeling off layers and going back and all, it's... Oh, well, goodness me, I don't have a homeopathic friend in the world probably, and whatever one that I do have is just about to go, because that whole peeling off layers is nonsense. It's nonsense. That doesn't mean to say that people don't go through a metamorphosis of change. They do. But it's not because of the peeling off of layers, and it's certainly not going to be because you have eradicated the survival instinct and now that you're some angelic being. That was never going to happen. Not on this planet. This is a planet. This planet's a jungle, man. You need that survival instinct. Okay, we may have replaced the Amazon for the concrete jungle, but there are still snakes, and there are still tigers, and there are still lions. It's just that now they're human predators. They're human lions. They're human snakes. They're human leeches. They're human parasites. But at the same time, there are human birds of paradise. There are human dolphins playing in the water. There are human seals that are just having a ball with their community. So not everything has to be bad, but you do have to understand what it is.
Right? Recognition. And maybe instead of peeling away something, what you're looking at with a life experience, if you focus on the "and", is that you're adding a new experience, you're adding a new wisdom, a new learning to the whole process of being who you are. And so therefore you're a composite as you build and build, but you've always got these two components, the soul and the survival instinct.
Yeah, and it's not about necessarily, and I'm talking about the average person, I'm not talking about criminality or anything here, because they do need to be judged harshly because you've done something wrong that has hurt somebody else. But I'm just talking about the average person who is under stress, who is an otherwise nice person, doesn't have to go through years of therapy when they talk about every time they become stressed, they snap and they do, they say bad things or they behave in a bit of an uncivil manner. You're meant to. You're designed for that. See,
but just don't get into stress too often.
Yes, but this is the maturity of it, is that once you understand that that's what you're going to do, you have to avoid the circumstances that put you there.
Yeah.
If you don't avoid the circumstances that put you in that situation, then you can't claim innocence either, right? Oh, sorry about my really obnoxious behaviour. Because I'm going to do it again in the next 5 minutes anyway. But I want you to forgive me now because it's in my best interest to do so. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is sort of, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to keep repeating this same pattern. Why do I do that? Now, everyone says that. Why do I do that? I know I don't want to do it. Well, it's because you've upset that energetic balance within yourself, and now you're going to do it. It's beyond conscious control. That's what I mean.
You're really well and truly in your survival instinct because your energy's out or down, but you give a good remedy.
Well, and now you start coming back into that energetic homeostasis where you can now make all of the... it helps you make the right decisions because your consciousness is now back into control. So you've got a much better chance of sort of saying, look, I was a real, dung heap then. So I don't want to be that person, but I know, examine it and say, I know what got me there, right? So if I know what got me there, I want to avoid the triggers that keep putting me back into those situations because I don't want to be that person.
Interestingly, though, when a patient gets a good remedy, particularly if you have this conversation with an adult because they can explain it more, they'll say, I was in the same stressful situation, but it just didn't trigger the way it normally would, or I got a mild sense of it, but then I was able to pull myself out.
Yeah, well, that's because you're building up a buffer zone now, right? So, you know, when Nietzsche said that what doesn't kill me makes me stronger, and I love Nietzsche. I love a lot about Nietzsche. I read a lot of Nietzsche when I was a teenager. You know, you go through that really kind of idealistic stage. And Nietzsche's one of the three great intellects of his time. So I'm not having a shot at him, but he's wrong. He's absolutely wrong. What doesn't kill me that makes me stronger is not true. If something
gradually weakens,
it does. It wears you down. And anybody who has suffered continual stress just knows it's drip, drip, drip. And eventually the water wins, right? It moulds the rock. Mm-hmm. The rock never moulds the water. It's always the other way around. But what homeopathy does is that it builds up your strength, so you've just got that little buffer zone before the survival instinct really kicks in. Because once that survival instinct kicks in, and to me that's what a miasm is, so we can go into that, but the survival instinct Yeah, it's a remedy is creating a buffer zone between trigger and response.
It's strengthening it up so that the response is within context, but more acceptable. And you know, you hear this, even the parents will say it about the children patients, that they're just, you know, they're not as oversensitive, they're not reacting as much. They're just being a bit more contained, a bit more balanced. They're still them. Their personality is still them. Other people also, that's interesting too, when you're in balance, other people start behaving differently around you. It's like they relax more, or they read you better, or they understand you better. But you often get that too. People say, yeah, I'm feeling better, but this person in my life is behaving in a better way too. It's interesting. It ripples all around.
Yeah, it does. And I've had, kids where they have always had trouble making friends, and suddenly they'll make a friend, I mean, I can't make an autistic kid that still has a diagnosis of pandas, even with the remedy, is always going to be autistic, okay? I mean, I write this all the way through pandas. So what we're talking about here is really otherwise kind of look that quote unquote normal, but they're just being pushed out of that normalcy. And so via stress or via whatever it is, and I don't know what it is really that pushes pandas kids out of that normalcy state. But when they go back into it, they just go back to school and they just do the things that all normal kids do.
They're often clever. They're often sensitive. Like, in that true, to be really clever in a way, I mean, I don't know, here's me commenting, but I feel like to be really clever, you have to be observant. Your senses have to be perhaps a little more acute, because you see things, you feel things, you hear things at a level that perhaps other people don't at that level that you do. And therefore, you're more sensitive to the bad as well as the good.
You are. It's a bit like... I'm not trying to say all artists have pandas or all pandas kids have artistic tendencies. That's not what I mean. But if you use the cliche of the struggling artist, the reason that they're struggling is because they just see things and feel things in a different manner. And maybe even to a greater depth, who knows? But the world's pretty harsh, and their observance is completely dependent on their senses taking all of this information in, which makes them really oversensitive and overreactive, and that can mean that life is a little harsh. And a lot of pandas kids, even though not necessarily, this is where I guess as I speak, it's there's not a lot of gains from pandas, because at least with the artist you've got the art, but with pandas you've got all the sensitivity and none of the painting.
Unless, until such a time that there's balance. And I know you've got some great stories of children that really become their better selves, perhaps still a little on the quirky side, but that's okay. That's called individuality, authenticity, and that we don't all want to be cut from the same mould.
No, they're not, and we don't want to. Yeah, I know what you mean. But and we don't want to just. It's really dicey to say this at this stage because so many kids are medicated, but. I don't like the idea of being medicated for everything, because some of these things are individual quirks. I mean, and they're going to be necessary for later on in their life for the development of whatever it is that they want to develop. And if you just medicate them out of it, okay, that they end up average, but they might have been. They might have been built for something a bit more.
Well, it's kind of like monoculture and diversity, isn't it? I mean, the monocultural field of just a whole, hundreds of miles of corn, one after the other, with hardly any insects or whatever, because the only way you can keep it all going like that is you've got to kill everything off, or you can get the diversity of the jungle where, you know, there's hundreds, if not thousands of different things all coexisting, making this amazing environment. But they're all individual, they're all different, and that's what humanity, its diversity is its strength, not its weakness.
Yeah. So, look, if you're doing behavioural medication because this person or this family isn't just not coping, that's one thing. If you're doing it because they're different, I'm not a fan of that, to be honest.
Difference is good. Now, that's a great segue into back to the book Soul and Survival.
So didn't you want, though, the subtitle?
Yes, I did. So we can go in that direction, or do you want me to continue with my thought process?
No, I'll do the subtitle because
I'll put that on hold then.
That's interesting because
the common human experience.
The common human experience. And the reason that I have that as a subtitle is because there's a lot of things that I hear clinically that you can't prove, but you hear it so consistently that the commonality becomes its proof. You know, like, I know that science sort of says we should ignore anecdotal evidence. But if there's millions of anecdotes, then my question becomes why. If there's a similarity to the anecdote, then why are we ignoring it? Because sheer volume becomes its own proof. There's so much to a human being that you can't scientifically prove. Prove that I'm thinking right now. Try and tell me what I'm thinking. I'll come up with an image. What am I thinking of? You'd have no idea. So, I mean, there's lots of things that we can't prove. We can't prove love, but we all experience it. We can't prove anticipation, but we all experience it. We were speaking one time about déjà vu experiences where you have a dream and you go into the future and you remember that future event when the past becomes the present. You can't prove that in a million years. You absolutely can't, because it just takes you at a whim. It's like proving ghosts. You know, often you can't prove that either because they sort of flash in and out. But to anyone that really truly believes that they've seen one, then that's proof. That's proof to them. And then there's millions of those people. So what do? Do you just turn around, you know, in that really sort of boring way of, oh, have you been drinking? It's just, it's a bit humiliating. It's a bit humiliating to the person that says it, you know, let alone the listener. But it's there. It's there. If it was just that one experience, then that doesn't mean much. I admit that, right? That's anecdotal. But when you have a common human experience, like love, or like anticipation, or like fear, or whatever it may be, you can't deny these things. The huge quantity of experience is its own test. That's why I'm saying it's the common human experience.
And so are you inferring that via your observations in the clinic, via the facial groups, that you saw some commonality within each group?
I did. I saw commonality within the group. I saw similarity within, like when I talk about things like the survival instinct, for example, and what pandas kids have in common. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have all things in common, like not every single panda's kid has every single symptom that I put down. But I can list you maybe 100 different symptoms that they are going to experience, and the average parent is going to go, oh, they've got that one, that one, that one, that one, that one. And it's the same with when I was doing more adults. I haven't done adults for a while, but because and this is the other thing of, when you're going to read quotes, or if you're going to read quotes, because you look like you've got that book open, and so now
You're looking nervous.
Now I'm experiencing anticipation.
You are. Oh, look.
But because
you'll be right.
So when the whole thing was, all right, how this came about was that, as you know, we started taking people's pictures and doing a facial analysis to it. And the reason that I did that is because going right back to people like Allen and Roberts and so on, they all spoke about how the miasm, and the miasm as I used to believe it in its more contemporary form, influences every aspect of the body. So if it influences every aspect of the body, and they were saying, and you can read it by reading the people's fingernails and all that kind of stuff. And they were doing that in India, remember, when you went.
Yeah.
So if it's going to show itself on fingernails, then it's going to show itself on a human being's most expressive part of their body. And the face is designed for communication and expression.
Well, it's where all the senses practically reside,
Yes,
isn't it?
it is.
It's extraordinary as a part of our body. You've
got the rest of the skin, but apart from that, yes.
Eyes, nose, mouth, ears.
Yeah.
And then you've got the touch.
Yeah.
Oh, and the taste. Yeah, sorry, I forgot that one. So, yeah, they're all
Our eyes are an outward manifestation of the brain. And all the muscles in the face. Mm-hmm. It's all muscular because it's not set.
And they're universal too across all cultures. Expressions can be read to match particular emotions, which is interesting in itself too.
And there's a huge part of our brain that starts getting formulated at a very early age to read facial expression, because it becomes really important for our own survival to understand whether our parents or our tribe is upset with us or nurturing or happy or, whatever it may be. And so we learn to judge another person's reaction, not by their fingernails, but by their face. And so if the miasm, to me, was going to express itself anywhere, then it would have to be in the expressive organ. I know face is not an organ, so don't write in, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. I do know what you mean, and it's turned out to be completely and utterly true from the perspective of the HFA process. What's interesting, though, and people do get this a little muddled at first, is it's not about expression, even though that's a very important part of our face. From a homeopathic process or a HFA process, it's about the structure. So it's size and shape and angle. And if you start looking at faces from the perspective of, what are the eyes like from a shape, an angle, a size perspective, a placement on the face, the shape of the nose, the forehead, the hairline, the teeth, the lips, the mouth, the chin, the lines on the face. There's so much commonality, but there's a whole lot of individuality there too. The individuality, of course, being in the composite that comes together.
Yeah.
Just like a case. You can have lots and lots of people who are worse for warmth or worse for cold or worse for touch or better for touch or whatever. And it sounds really common, but it's the combination that creates the uniqueness. And so there's a commonality to the process, but you come up with something different every time. It's like an amazing puzzle. Same pieces, different arrangement, and you've got individuality. Yeah.
So we started doing that, and I was seeing people come through telling me stories about the things the really stressful events in their lives. Because essentially chronic disease is a misappropriation of energy. So this is why conventional medicine has a real hard time with chronic disease, is because there's no infection. It's desperately looking for an infection because they work on a military model, right? Find the enemy and kill it. Mm-hmm. Right? But the enemy's within. You're sleeping with the enemy. It's you. And it's just the way you see things. You're in a permanent state of stress. Like, remember when we were talking about how all available energy is commandeered by the survival instinct if it goes out of balance, and it thinks that it's in danger, and so, you know, if you've got a little bit of energy, it just goes, okay, we're having that, and everything else has got to be put on hold. Now, I know that we were referring, originally to our consciousness, or what we like to think about as our higher aspects of ourselves. But the same thing happens with the body. All available energy is commandeered and put into the survival instinct. So the healing process of the liver, the healing process of the lungs, the healing process of any part of your body just is put on hold. Now, the problem when areas that are genetically weak are put on energetic hold is that it increases the chances of pathology beginning dramatically. And if that's put on hold for what can be a really long time, like we're talking years, now all of a sudden you have a pathology developing. But what I want to know is, what was the original stress that commandeered, what sent you into that place? It's not necessarily even that, in a Louise Hay sort of view, that, you know, anger equals liver or something. Although, you know, in saying that, I'm not trying to be mocking there, because that can be sometimes surprisingly accurate and really interesting from, I understand it's a little simplistic, but nonetheless, simple things can be hit home pretty hard. But it's more about what puts you into this state of energetic deficit or stress. To such a degree that all that available energy is being used up in this non-productive way, while all your cells are screaming out for the energetic nutrition that they need and slowly withering. Now, you know what? That's a huge topic, so I actually think we should come back to that.
That's fair enough. So I will keep the page open, which is in fact page 349 of Soul and Survival, because I want to talk about the brown miasm, because it's our time now. Brown people, brown outlook, it's kind of something I think we can all benefit from understanding, and I'm pretty sure you'll have some interesting things to say.
Well, I hope so. I should. If I get a chance, I should read the chapter and be a little prepared. But I don't think I'll. I've got a very busy week.
I bet you don't. But you've got a good memory. And
I want to also remind me, because I just want to finish. I also want to finish that moving the whole chronic disease aspect and the misappropriation of energy.
Okay, I've made a note.
All right. Okay, everybody. See you later.
Thanks, Grant. Thanks for listening to Soul and Survival. If you are interested in more information, books, courses, consultations, learning more about facial analysis or life themes, please visit our college site, Victorian College of Classical Homeopathy, vcch.org.